Hello and welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves, and today it's safe to say I'm a little nervous. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and keynote speaker from Davos, Martin McMahon. Martin, how was it over in Davos?
It wasn't too bad, actually. Me and Denny had a few drinks and, went to the tables, played a few games. It was good. It was good.
I'm glad you look rested.
I do.
More importantly, we're delighted to be joined in the Tortoise Shack by writer, activist, pro-choice campaigner, geek, gamer, feminist, and one of BBC's top 100 inspirational and influential women of 2016, Janet O'Sullivan. I'm only saying that nervously because that's quite a little introduction, Janet, and we've had some fantastic guests on. But when you have your own Wikipedia page, it just brings you up a little bit extra. Jan, you've written for numerous publications, including The Independent. I know I saw your pieces on Two Women Travelling and your constant voice for women's reproductive rights. There's nowhere else to really start off than where we are right now, because the Cabinet, as you said to me downstairs, are meeting right now.
The Cabinet are meeting right now to consider what the Attorney General has said to them in regards to repeal and replace. So currently, whatever wording they're considering for the referendum is being debated at the moment, and the date. And there are times I really look at the news and I pinch myself and I'm like, we're really here at this stage, and it's just amazing. And it's thanks to so many people working so hard for the last 5 years.
Can you tell me, like, in really simple terms, what choices face the Cabinet now? What would you like to see as opposed to what you think is coming down the line, or what you hope doesn't come down the line?
Well, medical technology advances all the time, right? So the idea that we would have anything in our constitution that would restrict healthcare is absurd, quite frankly, because we don't know what medical developments are going to happen. So to have to go back and have a referendum to change something in our constitution because of medical advancements for the betterment of people is just ridiculous. So I'm very much for completely removing the Eighth Amendment, which is what gets referred to as repeal simpliciter. That it's a yes-no vote. Do you want the Eighth Amendment repealed? Yes or no, and then that article is deleted. Now they're saying the Attorney General, we don't know the advice yet. I do know Mairead Enright is an amazing law professor. She's one of the people involved with Lawyers for Choice, and she's been looking at it and saying that there might be other implicit rights possibly in the Constitution that we may have to look at. And they're also concerned about having cases taken to contest it, because we do know that the yes equality, marriage equality legislation was delayed because somebody took a case to the High Court in relation to referendum, so they're trying to avoid that.
Do you think that's avoidable?
I don't think it's avoidable. I think every citizen has a right to take a case if they're not happy with, or they think there's an issue with the Constitution or an issue with legislation. But I don't know how long that process might take. I don't know if people would have the money to engage in that process. Certain sections of society seem to have the money to do that.
Yeah.
But I can understand them not wanting to have that delay. So personally, if we were to do the repeal, which is remove the Eighth Amendment, and put in something else, the only thing I would like to see is a positive affirmation for bodily autonomy in Ireland, because this is not just women's rights issues, this also affects anyone who can get pregnant. So we're now in Ireland where we have our gender recognition bill, where we have trans men who may become pregnant, and we've non-binary people who may become pregnant, and we've gender fluid people who may become pregnant. So it's not just a women's issue, it's an issue for anyone who can become pregnant. So I don't want to see, bodily autonomy is very important, because one of the things we have with the trans community is they usually have to travel to get the healthcare they need. So there's a big issue around accessing healthcare that you need in this country for when you need it. So the only thing I would like to see in the Constitution, if we're putting something in, is a positive affirmation for bodily autonomy in relation to accessing healthcare.
I have a big problem with the phrase repeal and replace because of around the ACCA in the Affordable Care Act in the US, commonly known as Obamacare. Repeal and replace became this huge Trump what would you call it, motto, that we were going to repeal it and we're going to come up with this fantastic thing. And all of these best people in the US Senate and all of the best people in Congress were going to come up with this bill, and they were going to be able to put something together, and it was going to be better. And they really realised after months of trying and months of trying, whatever they were going to put in front of people was actually going to make the situation worse. There was problems with Obamacare. There was problems with it was going to make it worse. I would not trust our legislators that if we have to repeal and replace, that they wouldn't replace it with something that gives people who aren't qualified to make the right decision. And that's just my opinion, because I purely think about it in terms of elections are in 5-year cycles. If you give the option to say that we can legislate for that, and then at any particular stage in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, there's someone else is in power.
But there's no silver bullet to this. And the thing is, when we're looking at our constitution, and legislation changes all the time.
Yeah.
And when it comes to what the Citizens' Assembly actually said was that they wanted the 8th Amendment repealed, to have it removed, and something put in to say that the government would have to legislate. Because we've seen governments sit on their hands. We had the Miss X case, and we had the Supreme Court ruling in the Miss X case, which was 1994, and no government legislated for that. They actually had a referendum, had a second referendum, and didn't actually put in place legislation until 2013. That was the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act. We've also had a referendum on reforming the Seanad. And that was 76, so I was 1 then. And that hasn't happened. So the idea was, the Citizens' Assembly said, we will put something in that says that it empowers the government, the legislative body, to actually do legislation.
But would and I don't mean to sound, but I know they're still challenging Roe versus Wade in America. Okay?
I got a message from my friend in San Francisco where she was out with an anti-protest against that. And we have seen a roll back on abortion rights. We are seeing it happening in Poland. They tried it in Italy and were defeated. They tried it in Spain, they were defeated. They tried it in Holland and in the Netherlands and was defeated. So yes, there is a concern that we will have a very radically conservative government come into power and decide to tamper with the legislation. And I think that's why the abortion rights campaign is never going to go away. People have said to me, ARC was founded 5 years ago. We've achieved a hell of a lot in 5 years.
Yes.
People said there's no government will touch this issue in 10 years. The fact that we are on the eve of, we are sitting here while the government cabinet are discussing the wording of the referendum on the 8th Amendment, to me is momentous. But the abortion rights campaign is always going to have to be there. And people said to me, oh, it'll be great, there'll be no more marches for choice. I'm like, I don't mind. 40 years' time, if I'm going to the March for Choice and I'm 80 odd and I'm on a mobility scooter or a jetpack, I'm okay for that, because we have to have that positive culture that says people get to decide when they start their family, how many children they have in their family, if they're going to have a family, and in cases where there's a risk to their health, or in tragic cases of fatal abnormalities, people have to be able to make these decisions, and it has to be a positive thing to do. Now that means that we have to have a celebration for choice and have the March for Choice every year for the next 40 years. I'm down with that.
Well, Tony and I were chatting earlier on today in advance because we were a little bit intimidated, to be quite honest. so we wanted to get our everything in. But we were chatting about Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and the route they have taken in getting to this point in the referendum. They describe themselves as socially liberal, fiscally conservative parties. But in reality, they have to be dragged to the table every time, and every time there is a battle to be fought. They are as conservative socially as they are fiscally.
You know what's really interesting about this time? They are not in coalition with Labour or another left-leaning party. It is the people. It is the grassroots movement. It is people coming forward and sharing their stories. It is doctors being brave enough to say that we need to change our abortion rights. We had a statement today came out from the Association of Obstetrics and Gynecologists to refute some of the things being said on the other side. And the obstetrics and gynecologists said that they, for best practice in their work to provide healthcare, need the 8th Amendment done. So Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have moved to this position due to people telling their stories, people lobbying their TDs, people putting this pressure on them, and I think that is amazing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And at the time that Labour were pretty much wiped out there, we were getting dire warnings that it would never move forward without Labour. And it's great to see that, if anything, that the movement has gotten stronger since then, and it has gotten stronger.
That's one thing about the abortion rights campaign. It was set up to be apolitical, that anyone of any political persuasion can join and will work with any political party to make this happen. But it's not run by as a wing of a political organisation or political party, that anyone who wants to work on this issue can, and we tried to be as intersectional as possible.
Sinead Mercier referred to it as consensus building organisations, where you can actually find a consensus, you know, because she's in the Greens, and she spoke about that the Greens' ultimate ambition is to almost phase out the Greens, where everybody, Martin said, oh, but everybody steals your clothes. She said, wonderful. If everybody wore green clothes and they wore it would be wonderful.
That's the joy of a non-hierarchical feminist organisation, which the abortion rights campaign is.
Well, but like there is something else to be said to this, and I'm going to go back on it as well, and why you're saying it was apolitical. The big thing is, I know you said the people telling the stories, the doctors come in, and the people, you know, you've midwives for choice, you've nurses for choice, you've lawyers, solicitors for choice, you've all of these groups.
Pensioners for choice.
Grandparents
for choice.
But that's crucial, and but the big change.
They're the respectable professionals who now feel that it's okay to say that they're pro-choice.
But they're also, and I'm going to be more cynical, they're also the people who traditionally voted Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael as well. And you know as well as I do that Damascene conversions happen when you know that one, I think Micheál Martin is looking to his legacy. I think he's genuinely looking to his legacy. I think it is brave what he's done, because he's taken on a party that is actually at its core more pro-life than.
It's not that long ago he did an interview with the Journal, and he was asked about the 8th Amendment, I think it's about 4 years ago, and in regards to access to abortion where a person has been sexually assaulted, and he said, well, there's the morning after pill for that. And I was like, well, the morning after pill is only 72 to 120 hours, because there's 2 types, but that doesn't mean that someone who's in an abusive relationship can access that, or someone who doesn't have money can access that, or someone who lives down the country and can't get to a doctor can access that, or someone who is in shock and trauma from having will access that within time. So that was his thinking then, and his thinking has moved on so much, and he seems to have educated himself. I had my daughter saying to me, you've this weird look on your face all day, ma'am, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, Micheál Martin got up in the Dáil and said he's pro-repeal, and she was like, is that a party we don't like? And I said, well, that's a party that I didn't expect it. And she was like, you just have this weird look on your face all day. I was like, I'm just making sure I woke up in the right timeline. But I didn't move in an ultimate dimension overnight. But he has come a long way, but he's not the only one. And I think a lot of people were kind of like, the Citizens' Assembly was a stalling tactic. The Citizens' Assembly, there was them kicking the can down the road. But it showed what I firmly believe and what ARC believe is, when people are actually given the medical facts and the lived facts of people's existence, and when we're actually allowed to have those conversations around abortion, people come to realise that they are actually pro-choice because they're compassionate, because they care about people. They know we should have healthcare here at home. And that's been wonderful to see. And you saw the journey being made by those 1998 citizens, and it was broadcast online, so there was no need for balance. So anyone can actually go online to the Citizens' Assembly YouTube and actually sit and watch the sessions. And then we saw that moving on to the joint committee, and again people were like, more stalling tactics. And I was like, no, hang on, this is a joint committee, there's somebody from every party in there, let's see what happens. And again, those were live streamed, and I have to say Senator Noonan did really well in chairing for that.
Yes, actually did very well.
And the whole, I don't interrupt, I chair.
But you have to give credit where it's due. Very good. And
but you saw them looking at the same things, and they came to roughly the same conclusion as what the Citizens' Assembly came to, which is when people get a chance to look at the facts and they're not bombarded with overly emotive things like, or being told they're wrong, or they're morally reprehensible, or they're not respectable for thinking about this and looking at it. When people actually look at the facts, this is where people land. And it's been wonderful to see. But the Irish people have been on this journey as well.
And the date is going to be very important. When it happens is going to be very important. Do you favour quickly as possible, or would you like to see a longer time? I mean, I know students don't want it during the summer months, and everybody can understand that. It would be a pity if that happened. It's like you're cutting out a big section of the electorate.
You're not only cutting out a big section of the electorate, you're cutting out a big section of the young people in Ireland who are the future, and you're cutting out a huge amount of women, people who can become pregnant when they're in their reproductive prime. You know, if you're saying to someone who's 20, you can't decide what what's going to happen to your own body over the next couple of years. Or if you're going to start a family, you're going to be here where your choices in birth and your choices in pregnancy around medication are restricted. Because we have had mothers taken to the High Court being told they disagreed with their doctors about what their dates were and being forced to have C-sections. We've also had people refuse medication. We have people being told, well, you're on this medication for this condition, which you can't take anymore, sorry, tough. But yet, and I know someone who did actually move to the UK, and they were given a different type of medication, which had a lesser risk to the pregnancy, but that risk was too much of a risk here in Ireland under the 8th Amendment.
And there are other
it's
issues
huge.
too, like we had a woman that was kept alive, which was just the most, I have no words for it, it's beyond belief. It's beyond my scope of belief.
The 8th Amendment makes us into vessels.
Yeah,
Once an embryo implants in your body, the 8th Amendment means the doctors and the High Court gets to decide what happens to you.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. What's the worst wording that could come in your opinion?
I would hate to see a wording which would not cover the majority of people who currently travel and take pills in Ireland. I would hate to see it being restricted. You can't legislate for rape. Sexual assault, you can't. You're going to force people to disclose. I think less than 7 people who are sexually assaulted disclose. You can't. It's not fair to put someone through that process. And currently it takes 18 months for a rape case to get to our courts.
Yeah.
So if you're pregnant from those circumstances, that's not going to work. I would hate to see it restricted to fetal abnormality, rape, incest, and life. There's risk to a person's life. I don't think we're going to get that.
No, I don't think so either. I think they've actually, and I think you've rolled it out very clearly, because, as you know, I think when the Citizens' Assembly was announced, I remember tweeting that they've chosen the car, they've put the petrol in, they've picked the drivers, they've picked the passengers, and then they were getting all annoyed when they arrived at a destination, because they came out and they said, I don't think the majority of people are ready for this. And we kept hearing this. We did keep hearing this, that I don't know if that's how everybody feels. And I had this conversation with a high-profile journalist, and I said to him, yes, maybe they don't. Maybe you're right. I said, but if they have the facts as they were given to the people in the committee, they went on the journey, and they that's where they came to that conclusion. Very much so. Like, I mean, it's you mentioned Micheál Martin only a couple of years ago. Leo Varadkar was, as health minister, said that
Leo's one of my TDs. The Taoiseach is one of my TDs, and he's been flip-flopping on this issue for a while. But I'm really happy to see that he's come out and he said he will campaign, because I campaign and canvass door to door during the equality campaign in relation to the referendum with some of the groups that Leo was campaigning with door to door, and I look forward to campaigning with him again, hopefully.
No, I think that's, well, he came out, he told the BBC he's going to campaign. He was not very categorical in what he's campaigning for.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask.
No, but
repeal.
But his job, you've got to understand, he's not just Leo Varadkar, he's the Taoiseach as well.
But in the history of our state, we've only ever had one Taoiseach who came out and campaigned against a referendum that his government had put forward.
Yeah, and
that was Dr. Garrett Fitzgerald, who came out against the 8th Amendment in just the last week or so before of it, and went, this is a really bad idea.
And it cost him politically for the rest of his career.
Yeah. But the really interesting thing is, we had Red C polls, and we had polling before the Citizens' Assembly saying the majority of people were for the repeal of the 8th Amendment, and they weren't believed. And they were like, but no, rural people won't. And I'm kind of like, that's not my experience of having a rural family. They know that if a cow is sick and the cow needs to have an abortion, and you can't save the calf, and you've got to look after the health of the cow, it gets done. I know somebody else has got a cat, and the cat wasn't well, and I was like, okay, well, what are the options? So cats have a better qualified right to their health than I do in Ireland. But we saw the Munster region coming back very strong. So I think the polling is there. I think people have been quietly pro-choice. I think it was too taboo a topic. But once we actually started organising, and once we actually started making the space to have those conversations, we didn't automatically get jumped on. It was amazing. I've had an older lady come up to me when we were at the stall, and she came over and she went, "Are you for or against abortion?" And the hand gets clamped on the wrist, and you're kind of looking at her going... And I took a deep breath and respectfully said that we're looking to repeal the 8th Amendment because... And I had prejudged her. I had looked at her and looked at her age and thought, maybe she's, conservative and she's going to try bless me. And she said, good, I'm glad. This needs to change. She said, I went with my sister. She said, a long time ago, and this absolutely needs to change. And I thought, holy crap. And then when we did the soapbox with the National Women's Council, they do a soapbox on International Women's Day in the middle of O'Connell Street. I spoke at it. And I had, and again, similar experience, a lady in her late 60s to 70s come up to me. And I was like, okay, you just give them a space to talk. And she said, thank you for doing this. And I went, no, it's important, it needs to be done. She goes, I travelled. She said, I travelled over to my sister in the UK, she said, and I had an abortion when I was in my 20s. And she said, I came back and I didn't tell anybody. She said, I got married and I had 6 kids. And she said, my husband went to his grave, never known. She said, didn't tell anybody. And I'm like, I know I am one of 170,000 people that we know have travelled to the UK. Some people give a friend's address, a relative's address. They don't give an Irish address. Some people go visit family in France, or they go to Holland. So there are literally, if we're saying the Conservative number is 170,000, I think it's more than that. I think we could have easily have 200,000 people in this country who've had to travel or who've taken abortion pills at home.
They were denied healthcare in their home country.
Yeah, so I'm not a minority, I'm not an outlier. It's a normal part of healthcare for people. But we've been stigmatised for so long that I know somebody who was due to travel and her mother told her, actually, I travelled. That there's this disconnect between grandmothers, mothers and adult children. Somebody else had a conversation with their granny recently, who's in her 70s, and said, are you, this referendum thing, which way are you voting? And they were a bit, looked at their granny and said, well, I'm voting for repeal and for abortion rights. And the grandmother said, good. I remember when Mary down the road was due to have a 9th pregnancy and it would have killed her, so we organised a whip around and she stayed with such a body's auntie over in the UK. So these have always been the hidden stories, and this has always happened. But we needed to stop exporting it and stop punishing people.
You mentioned grandmothers having a whip around, and that's an important factor in that some women have always been able to afford to travel to England. But there is socioeconomic factors are huge in this, and that women from working class, and you know this, you said this to me before, women in direct provision, there are a whole load of women that it's simply not open to them because the cost of travelling to England is so expensive for them.
Currently, there's a wonderful organisation called Abortion Support Network, and they organise small money and grants, because currently you have to have your flights to travel over, and then it's between 500 and up to 1,600 depending on how far along a pregnancy is.
Yeah.
So if you're in the first kind of 12 weeks of a pregnancy, it's the guts of £1,000 to travel over and travel back. This means that it's prohibitive for a whole lot of people. There are people who have children who just don't have the money. There are people who would need to get visas. There are people who can't get travel documents because they're trans. They just don't have that type of money. I was very lucky. I was well in with my credit union. I was working when I travelled for my abortions. I actually got an abortion loan. But there are lots of people who just aren't in that position, and that's why I consider myself really incredibly lucky. Now, we are seeing more people who don't have money learning about the abortion pills.
Yes.
But it is very much a socio-economic thing. And there are people who said that even if we do get abortion here in Ireland, there'll still be some people who want to travel, because Ireland is a very small place. But if they have the money to travel, they'll do it. But we have to look after the people who can't, be it migrant people who can't get visas to leave the country. You can't leave the country if you're applying for Irish citizenship as well. That's another thing as well. If you're in your 2 years of becoming new Irish, there's the limited amount of time you can travel out of the country, and you could reach your limit and then realise you need to travel to have an abortion.
Yeah.
You might have been on your 2 weeks holidays or whatever it is, and you get back and then that's a very real.
But it's not just the socio-economic of the money, it's also the time. There are people who can't get time off work. There are people who have children that can't get childcare. There are people who are looking after dependents, be it an older relative or somebody with a disability. They can't get time off work. Or there are people who are too ill to travel. So there's a whole range of reasons why people can't travel, or whether they're in direct provision or whether they can't get visas. So the only way to absolutely make sure that everybody can access the healthcare they need is to make it free, safe and legal. And I had a lot of people saying, what do you mean by safe? Well, safe means under medical supervision, because you have to have doctors involved. Now, the abortion pills are good, but not everyone can use them. Like the pill, the hormonal contraception, only 80% of people can take it. 1/5 of people can't actually use it. So, there are certain medications that are suitable to everyone, so there has to be medical supervision. So safe means in line with best medical guidelines, best medical practice, which this country doesn't have while the 8th Amendment is in place. Legal means that it is legal to have this abortion, because currently, unless you're on death's door, it's not illegal. It's not legal to have abortion here in Ireland. And then people say, free? What do you mean free? Why am I paying for somebody else's abortion? Let's get a credit union loan. Free because all maternity health care is free in Ireland. It's covered by the Maternity and Infants Act.
Yes.
So all maternity health care is covered. This should just fold in with that. So, and it is really that simple. Also free is to make sure everyone can access it. And people will say to me, but you know, the cost of it. And I said, well, one of the things the Giant Oireachtas Committee came back on was universal free contraception. And I'm very much for that.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, so fair enough, if you have a medical card, you can get accessing contraception can be fairly simple. And on the other end then, if you're well enough to do, you can get your contraception. But that's squeezed middle. One third of women are struggling with getting contraception.
I mean, the price, I was only saw this recently, that the price of the bill just for a month is really quite expensive. I think it was 120 for the month. Am I right?
No, that's the, I think that's your prescription, your
GP.
To go to the doctor is 50 quid, and then a 3-month prescription is about 24 quid per month.
Per month, yes. So that's
on top of that. And the cheapest type of contraception are actually the long-acting replaceable contraceptives, or LARCs. And that's the IUD, the Marina, and there's a new one coming out as well, or there's the bar. But they have an outlay of 200 to 500 quid.
Yeah.
And that works out cheaper over the 5 to 3 years you can use them, but you have to have the money to put that initial outlay up front. And a lot of people don't have it.
I think it was a great idea, and I think it's one that, should be certainly pushed forward on. I sort of noticed that Italy's free, safe and legal came into enforcement 40 years ago this year. So I'm hoping that there's some sort of anniversary correlation that it'll work. But Italy's a very similar type of country to us.
Italy has another problem though. Italy has a big issue with what they call the conscientious objection. So currently doctors can decide they don't prescribe contraceptives to non-married people, or they don't prescribe contraceptives at all.
Yeah.
That's the conscientious objection. And then you have doctors then in Italy who decide they don't want to have anything to do with prescribing the abortion pills or doing surgical abortions, full stop. As a result, it can be very troubling trying to access abortion care as healthcare, because the doctors simply won't do it. And the few doctors who do end up under enormous pressure, and instead of it being part of their OBGYN practice, it becomes the only thing they do. And that's not why they got into OBGYN, was to do the full range of care. So I'm really concerned that we will have a conscientious objection here, which will restrict access. We might have free, safe and legal, but because the conscientious objection, it might restrict access. Because it's not just the repealing of the 8th Amendment and new legislation, it's new HSE policy, it's new policies in hospitals, it's new policy for doctors, because the doctors will be doing the prescribing of the abortion pills. So, and then you have those practices will have to be vetted by the medical insurers and put in place. So these are all things which may delay us actually being able to access free, safe and legal abortion in Ireland.
And that concern plays out globally, because you look at like different states in America where they've decided what we'll do is we won't roll back, roll away. We've lost that battle, but what we've actually done is we've said that it has to be in X town at X place where we have this, and then all you have is that the anti-abortion people flock to this and absolutely cause havoc for anybody going to receive health care. And it's not even like, this isn't something that I'm making up, this is something that's happening probably this evening.
Women in South Dakota have to travel 3 times as far as women from Mayo to London to try access abortion care, which is logistics, which is time, which is money. And then they're trying to bring in a 48-hour to 72-hour delay. So what happens then is you have the waiting period. So you could have to get your time off work, get your money, travel to this far place, and then have to stay there on hold waiting. You know, someone else is going to mind the kids, or you're missing work, and then to have your abortion.
There was a great, and I say this as a guy who thought he was going to play in the NBA when he was a kid. He was a basketball head, and Michael Jordan was God, right? But Michael Jordan
is a basketball head.
But Michael Jordan owns the Charlotte Hornets, and they were the All-Star game, which is a big thing in the States. They were going to host the All-Star game, and Adam Silver is the head of the NBA, and they were having problems with accessing female healthcare, and then an issue came up about trans people in Charlotte and Adam Silver turned around and said to Michael Jordan, "You're not getting the All-Star game," and they moved it to New Orleans, and it cost the city of Charlotte millions in revenue and all this that would have gone. And I just thought to myself, well, at least there is, there's elements where the force of good can be done, which is why when I see things like as we spoke through the different groups that are involved, I think there is a place very much for the male voices that we feel that we got to stay out of this because it's a woman's thing. It's not, because when I see an NBA franchise standing up for female healthcare, that's a different thing.
When people have to travel to the UK because of the cost, it often means they travel on their own.
Yeah.
They don't bring their partner with them.
That is true.
They don't bring their husband with them. And that's particularly heartbreaking in cases of fetal abnormality. That this was a pregnancy that was wanted, they had plans, and then they found out that it wasn't to be. And in cases of fetal abnormality, which is less than 2% of abortions in the UK, are in that later term, which is 24 weeks plus, because they only do the anomaly scans at 22, 24 weeks, and then people find out, and then they got to figure out what they're going to do, and then they have to make the decision. And if they feel that they can't continue the pregnancy, knowing that in the meantime that the baby will die inside them or die soon after birth, and they make that really hard decision to end the pregnancy, in some cases they can't have family with them. That it's too and that is the more expensive end of it. And there's actually in Liverpool Women's Hospital a special ward for Irish women, because 2 women every week travel over there to end a pregnancy with fetal abnormality. It's actually called the Shamrock ward, and in some cases they can't have their husband with them, or they can't have their mammy with them.
Yeah.
So if those women were able to be looked after here in our maternity hospitals here, we could have a special floor in one of the maternity hospitals for women in this situation, and they could have their husband, their partner, their sister, their mammy, everyone.
Yeah.
Because you do see people who, when they have gone through the delivery process of fetal abnormality, will take some pictures of their child. It is their child, and they will then bring the pictures home. And it's a case of, if they were able to be around their friends and family, what is meant to be a really happy time, which unfortunately is a tragedy, they would get much more support. So when people say, well, we don't punish people for having abortions in Ireland, I'm like, we do. In the most hardest ways.
What you're saying to me just reinforces what you said earlier, that this is an ongoing process. The finish line is not repeal the 8th. It's not even close to repeal the 8th. And that brings us on to ARC a little. Can you explain to us about ARC and the purpose of ARC and what ARC is hoping to do?
Well, the abortion rights campaign, we're turned 5 this month. What happened was, do you remember those horrible posters that were put up? There was 5 years ago over the summer, that July. It looked like the government was finally going to legislate for the X case, and all these posters went up all around the town and on billboards, and specifically on the buses that go to the airport. There was this big poster campaign out everywhere. And if you weren't clued into reproductive rights in Ireland, you were like, why the hell are all these posters up? And the tagline was, abortion always tears her life apart. Well, that got a couple of us really pissed off and angry, because it didn't tear my life apart. It meant that I could live my life and go on to have the 2 children that I have now, who I absolutely adore. And a group of people got online and said, let's organise a meeting. So you got a whole lot of people, and we organised a meeting. Actually, it was the Radical Anarcho Feminist group, RAG, hosted. That's where our non-hierarchical group comes from.
Oh no, that's just too. Cut the tape. We gotta go.
RAG organised this open meeting, and it was a case of whispers. And like I said, being pro-choice was still so stigmatised. Saying you were pro-choice could get you horrendous abuse online. Never mind being brave enough to say you travelled.
You broke a taboo there. I mean, you did break a taboo when you were on the @Ireland account, and it's a taboo that a lot of women now have since come forward and spoken about. So you have to be given great credit for that. That was a brave thing to do.
Oh, my dad calls me ructions. So we got together and had a meeting, and we're looking at all these posters going, these posters must have cost a bomb, and it has upset and alienated so many people. Like I said, I'm one of 170,000, and so there were people who would have been travelling for the 2 weeks those posters were up, and there were people who would have been getting the news that their pregnancy is fetal abnormality, and we're like, this has to end. So we got together and we formed a small group called the Irish Choice Network. And we started to try to network all these different groups and people together. And we were trying to look at what needed to be done. And then we went, actually, the IFPA do their thing, and the National Women's Council do their things, and they're NGOs, and they've got separate funding. And what actually needs to happen is we actually need to have a campaigning group for rights. That's what's actually needed. Because these other groups, because they are charities, can't do this type of political lobbying work.
Yes.
And we can't actually get out there, and we need to actually get out there and have those conversations, have those discussions, get actual real information in front of people, and be brave.
And a little aside that you say that these charity groups can't, and we've seen that this week. in that homeless charity groups have gagging clauses being put into their
financing.
yeah. So
Yeah. One of the things I really hate about this country is there are essential services that we need access to, which are in line with not being denied our human rights. Be it the sexual health services, be it the sexual assault counselling, be it homeless services, be it rehab, be it Down syndrome, be it all of these charities that you see for everything from epilepsy to cystic fibrosis to MS. Why are they charities? Why are they not services that are funded through our tax base by the government? Why is the government saying this is healthcare, but these individual pockets that deal with people, we're going to give them to charities and we're going to underfund them and we're going to make them fundraise? That absolutely does my head in.
But that is actually I think it's a Victorian mindset that we have here in this country that goes across the board, and it's got steadily worse, where we've outsourced our responsibilities to our
I don't think it's Victorian. I think it goes back to the foundation of the state, because the foundation of our state, when our statesmen got together and had our first Dáil, they handed over welfare, health and education to the Roman Catholic Church to deal with.
Yeah, well,
and that's so you know, if you were poor, you went into the poorhouse. If you were a woman, you were put in the Magdalen laundries. If you were a child who was not being looked after at home, or if you're an orphan, you were put in orphanages and then industrial schools. This was how they did welfare.
One of our previous guests called it warehousing the poor.
No, she said the poor are always convicted of poverty.
Yeah.
And she said we've warehoused our shame for since the foundation of the state, which we know, but it still
that was
comes.
Mary McCall.
Yeah.
But it still goes back to the simple fact that our government call charities and associations their partners, and they use the language of business now about them, and they refer to them.
I'm sorry, our state should be providing the essential services,
but they
and we see with disabilities.
Imagine calling them service providers, but disabilities always they called Peter McVerry a service provider, and I just said a service provider. Wow, that's what you say to someone who delivers your Deliveroo, who delivers for a certain restaurant. That's their service provider.
Sorry, if we could get rid of Focus, and we could get rid of Peter McVerry Trust, and we could get rid of all of it and give people homes. They've shown this in Canada, they've shown this in Denmark. The first thing you do is you build houses and you give a person the dignity of their own space to shut the door, and all of the other problems you deal with them. But how much of those problems, everybody thinks it's drug and addiction, but it's not. It is the lack of housing and the lack of the right to housing in this country. How can you be a parent trying to parent your children in a hotel room and then find out that your contraception has failed?
Yeah.
And you don't have money then to travel. And even if you do access the abortion pills, you have to then try to take them. And the abortion pills, they are very safe. They're on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. But it's a regime of tablets you take over 24 hours. I've sat with people when they take them. It can cause vomiting, diarrhea, severe cramps. It's like a really bad gastroenteritis. So you're trapped, you're in your hotel room with your kids, with your family trying to rear them, while you're going through this.
We have
that's no dignity at all.
No, and we've decided then we have huge social crisis here, right? We're talking about, and you said you didn't think 5 years ago when you started ARC that we would be sitting here this evening and we know we're on the precipice of the vote. I kind of blatantly said today that it's going to be successful as well, and I even wrote on broadsheet that it's going to pass, and I firmly believe it's going to pass. That's I'll shake your hand, Martin, now and take your money.
No. I just think it's going to be close, and I'm.
It's not going to be close.
Last time it was close.
Yeah, but this time
when the age was put in, it was close.
But this time. The reason I'm so confident is because of bloody Simon McGarr. Simon, when I get you, I'll throttle you. Simon convinced me that because of the baby boomers, the 35 to 45 year olds, how the world has bent to their will, which it has now. When you look at these things, we hold the reins of power now.
I agree
in that thing, and if it's what they want, they're the biggest voting bloc now, and I believe predominantly that generation.
You mean Generation X is finally getting looking?
I think that's what. But they own the world now in terms of But
my concern is that people will get overconfident.
Yeah, no complacency, please, no complacency.
Well, I'm disappointed that I think you made a comment or two about this online, that the vitriol is escalating, and that people are buying accounts and web names, and there's a whole lot of subterfuge going on. And I find that disappointing. On a political, just purely, I'm just going to take its objective, it's really, really interesting to see how bot armies and influence are going to be used in this. Really interesting.
Yeah. I think people need to look at trusted sources. I think people need to talk to people they actually know and trusted sources, because you can see lots of people having rants online or on Twitter and whatever, but they need to actually seek out trusted sources. So whether it be the abortion rights campaign and our 20 odd regional groups and looking what they're doing and having those conversations, or if they want to go to the websites that the other side own and look at their factual information. But there can be a lot of hot air online, and it's a case of kind of going, where are your trusted sources? What do you want to read? Like I said, the Citizens Assembly, all their videos and stuff is actually up on citizensassembly.ie, so people can go look at the impartial information and figure stuff out. We get an awful lot of tongue policing. I remember being told that free, safe and legal and abortion without restriction or without having to give, a hard reason for up to 12 weeks was too extreme. And that's why we had groups who decided not to affiliate with ARC, because they thought that was too extreme. And some of them were for the repeal of the 8th Amendment and for other restrictions, and they joined the coalition for the repeal of the 8th, and that's fine. But we were told it was too extreme and we would have to compromise. And I'm like, we're not even close to discussing legislation 2 years ago, and people were saying that the abortion rights campaign needed to compromise their position to get to where we are today. And the answer was, no, we don't. And actually, when you look at the facts, the Citizens Assembly and the Joint Committee, and now they're looking at up till 12 weeks without restriction, which in most cases will be the abortion pills, which have been used in France since 1988, and they're incredibly safe. So they've been used in France since 1998, so if there was any severe issues with them, we would see the medical data from France. That also means that if Miss X, the 14-year-old who was raped and ended up pregnant, in 1992, she'd have lived in France, she'd have been given the prescription of those pills, and that would have been the end of it.
Yes.
It also means that migrant Y, the young woman that travelled to Ireland, sought asylum, and when she got here was found to be 8 weeks pregnant. If she'd have been in another European country, she would have been given the pills, and that would have been the end of her pregnancy. She wouldn't have had to continue a forced pregnancy and forced C-section. So they have to look at the fact that the pills are available. People now know about them. If I ended up with an unintended pregnancy, touch wood I don't, and taking all the precautions I can, I'm 42. My youngest is nearly 18. I'm done having kids. But
touch wood again.
Yeah, done having kids. For me, the abortion pills would be a better option for me than having to travel.
Yeah, of course.
So they have to deal with these realities. But we get told that we're too shrill.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going, no. And then people say we're too militant. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're asking for our rights. We've been asking politely for our rights. We don't vilify the other side. We just give our information.
I have found that's the funniest part of it, where articles are in mainstream media, these op-eds go up and they say, and they make things about, it's almost, again, we're going back to Trumpisms of many sides, people on both sides are, and you're going, well, actually, and then the reaction online is almost vitriolic from the pro-life side. And then, and I remember recently Patsy McGarry said, "Oh, I'm taking dogs abuse from both sides." And a few people asked, "Where, Patsy? I don't see the pro-choice side giving you anything." I've seen people actually ask you, "Point it out to me, Patsy," and radio silence.
I don't get the whole extremes on both sides. The extremes on both sides are no one's to ever have an abortion, and everybody's always to have an abortion.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of pro-choice. It's saying let people make their own decisions.
But Ken Fox made a very good point. He said we need to stop demanding a reasonable for everybody to be reasonable with one another, because they're one other side is just never going to agree with the other side.
But it's not going to happen.
They're not. Yeah,
reasonable debate in this is possible on social media. It's not possible.
I don't know. I've had some interesting ones, but they have to be civil. And I have a curious cat thing at the moment, which allows people to ask me anonymous questions. I've been running the hashtag AskJan. That if anybody in good faith, whatever their position is, wants to ask me a question, or as a fact they want to check, or they want to know why free, safe and legal, or where I'm getting my data from, that they can ask me anonymously and I will answer that question. So I'm absolutely open to having discussions.
And for listeners, that's Jan's pinned tweet at the moment as well on Twitter. It's in there at the hashtag AskJan, and it's a curious cat link attached to it.
But the thing is, people talk about the extremes on both sides, and I'm like, hang on, no one smashed a window yet. We're coming up on 100 years of women starting to get the right to vote in this country. So this is the 100 year of women starting to get the right to vote. You have to be over 30 and you have to own land or property, right? This is the year that women started to get the right to vote. Suffragettes travelled from the Dáil, smashing windows down Grafton Street, down smashed the windows in the GPO, and Hannah Sheehy Scaffington famously smashed a window at Dublin Castle.
That's right.
So when people talk about how the pro-choice side are extreme, I'm like, I haven't smashed a window. I don't know of anybody else who's smashed a window.
Martin just breaks windows most Friday evenings.
You know, I've never gone up to somebody who's pro-life and told them that they were wrong, and they decided to have their children taken away from them, or they should have a forced hysterectomy.
Yeah.
Which I've had said to me.
Yeah,
You know?
well, I know my daughter has been in town a couple of occasions when there was a pro-life march on. She does not like it, not one little bit. She doesn't like people being in her face. You know, so I understand that, and I do get that. I just think the sooner the vote is called, the better for everybody. I think it can be very divisive. I think it's been looked at as an end of the road decision, and it's nowhere near an end of the road decision.
What I think is really interesting is our TDs, our elected politicians, are no longer scared of what is less than 7% of our population. Because it's 7% the polls told consistently do not want the 8th Amendment repealed. Under any circumstances. So everybody else has been held hostage by the 7% and denied abortion rights here, denied healthcare here, denied their human rights here because of that incredibly vocal, well-funded, God knows from where, 7%. And that's what's changed.
You mentioned that this week. We saw that they have people in the employ who worked on the Trump campaign and on the pro-life side. They have people who worked on the Brexit campaign on the pro-life side. They even went to the trouble of buying up.ie domains of Repeal the 8 so they could just plant stuff on it. Now, you know, you can look at that the other way and say, oh well, fair play to you, nice and organised, but you've got to look behind the mechanics of that, the machinery and that, the mentality in that.
Well, it's the mentality, I'd say. If one side doesn't think as deviously as the other, are they?
I don't think is that we can't think that deviously. I'm a gamer. I can be quite devious. It's I have my own ethics and morals, and that they would not have me setting up a Twitter account pretending to be a pro-life group and tweeting things that aren't true, that don't come from them.
Yeah.
I think that's a level that we do not need to sink to.
Well, I think we can look to Michelle Obama on that one, and she did have some good advice in her
When they go low, we go high.
Yeah, I agree. I think if everybody dives into the gutter on this one, I think it's just better to sit back and maybe point out that's a fake account or that's fake without comment. Just let people know.
I genuinely will look at, when I get stuff that's tweeted, which is having a go or not in good faith, I will look at the account. I will look at, is it a person behind the account? Is it somebody's personal account where they're tweeting things? Or is it someone who has not even 12 followers and their stuff is just retweets and there's no person engaging, there's no personality, and then just mute them?
Yeah, okay, they're the simple ones. There was a very, very clever one that set up just around Christmas, and it engaged with Labour people. It retweeted Labour favourable things.
Yes.
And then it hit with this outrageous tweet. This outrageous tweet. And what they were looking to do was catch somebody big retweeting that. Then it would be screen grabbed and weaponized.
Or not even that. They would just take a picture of the tweet on the timeline with all the followers.
Yes, that's what you do. You purely, once you've, it's like that stuff is, it's sophisticated, and it is sophisticated.
That's really
most people,
sophisticated.
But again, that's a case of checking. Is this a reliable source? Is this
I
someone
agree
that
with you.
can
Yeah,
well,
with you.
we had it last week. We had Ibrahim Alawa on, and he spoke to us, and he
got so much abuse.
And the first, but you wouldn't believe, he turns around, he goes, well, where did this thing about my passport come? He said they took the thing, they stapled it to your file, they put you in prison. And he turned around, and the first thing came up online and goes, he ripped up his passport, and we just ignored it. But someone else who followed
Terry Pratchett has a line in his book The Truth, which is really interesting. It's a Discworld book, so it's set in that Discworld fantasy novel. Yeah. But it's also his background as a journalist, because he started as a journalist. And the line that it is, a truth can be halfway around the world, a lie can be halfway around the world, for the truth has put its boots on.
Before it gets its boots on, that's a
because outrageous lies.
Yeah.
And the actual factual information is a lot less sensational and is a lot more boring.
Yeah, that's the fact. But like he literally broke it down, and this person commented and clearly hadn't even listened. Like, says, why didn't you ask about the passport? He goes, didn't have to. We answered it. Did you not hear him in the podcast? And,
some people only want their own views to be reaffirmed.
Well, that's bias confirmation.
Yeah.
And that's how that account was so clever. It worked to Labour's bias confirmation.
I had people say to me, but Janet, I've never seen you talk about term limits or restrictions. And I said, okay, if an abortion is something which is a healthcare procedure, and abortions are done for the risk to the health of the person and the risk to the life of the person, do we put restrictions on heart surgery? We don't.
No.
This is where it has to be a safe medical procedure. So I can't make a carte blanche decision that there's this arbitrary cut-off, because everybody's body is different and everybody's medical condition is different, and only the actual doctors and the person whose health it is can make that nuanced decision in its time.
And parents have come out and asked that their children not be used in this campaign as tools, and we're going to respect that on here, and we're not going to do it.
ARC wrote one article on Iceland, because Iceland got spoke about a lot, and people have said there were no Down syndrome births in Iceland going back over 3 years. And Iceland is a country. Iceland has 250,000 population.
Yeah,
so statistically, for there not be any Down syndrome births in Iceland is normal for the size of the population. That happens from year to year. There are people in Down syndrome, living with Down syndrome in Iceland, and they're part of their families and they're part of their communities. The other side cherry-picked that fact. So there was a factual piece written about it. But we would be very much respecting people when they ask. We see there are people who have Down syndrome and people who have children with Down syndrome, and they're on a spectrum between pro-life and pro-choice. I think Down Syndrome's Ireland's ask was reasonable and timely, and I would really love for it to be respected.
Yeah, agree. Completely agree.
Look, I think we'll move just then and actually just ask you a question. So, a gamer. You mentioned you're a gamer.
Oh, I'm not just a gamer, I'm an omni-gamer.
Okay, an omni-gamer. Now, you came in the door and my daughter came up and nearly high-fived and went, I have a Nintendo Switch and I have a DS and I have a... and I looked and I went, I have no idea how to play any of them, really.
Well,
what's the...
Okay, so in terms of video games,
yeah,
at home we have an Atari and an Amiga.
Oh, right.
A SNES, a Super Nintendo, a Mega, and they all work, and we've all the old games, we've the old Amiga games. Yeah. We have a PlayStation 3, an Xbox One, and then I have my own computer because I'm a PC Master Race gamer. and my kids have their own computers as well, and we play family games together.
Right.
But I say omni-gamer because I'm also a tabletop gamer. Oh, right. So Dungeons and Dragons and Slay Industries and Vampire the Masquerade, and also different kind of types of card games as well. Yeah. And I was involved with helping run GaelCon, which is the national gaming convention that runs every October. It's been running for nearly 30 years.
That's right. Yes.
This weekend just gone, we'd WarpCon down in Cork. And the next one in Dublin is Leprechaun. That's the 16th to the 18th of February in Trinity and Goldsmith Hall. So if anybody's been hearing about Dungeons and Dragons and wants to give that type of game a go, come along to Leprechaun. Like I said, Goldsmith Hall that weekend. And you come in and it's usually a tenner for the weekend, and then you just play the games. And people are happy to sit down and teach other people to play it. I bring my own kids.
I will admit on the pod, but I'd never say publicly, I did actually play a bit of Dungeons and Dragons when I was younger, but
Taco.
Now these I still like computer games, but I like shooting things. I just like shooting things.
I like shooting things in the face. There's some days of being online. All I want to do is boot up Warframe and just shoot things in the face.
It's cathartic, isn't it?
And I would consider myself over there. I like that I still have the Nintendo with the games, working order.
Killer Instinct, one of the best fighting games.
I have the original PSP with all the original games. I have the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and then I switched from PlayStation to Xbox because PlayStation got too expensive. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've played pretty much all. I mean, one of those games that the kids loved that I played was Zelda. God, I loved Zelda. It was one of the best games.
My kids grew up playing the Spyro games. The Dragon.
Yeah.
They were great.
Spyro, yeah.
So, and it was very much is your homework done? Are your chores done? And then they'd be allowed to play the console. And when they get older, then there was a lot of talk this week about keeping your kids safe online. Yeah. And there's a friend of mine, Tom Murphy DeBoer. He says if you wouldn't let your child into the city at night time unaccompanied, don't leave them unsupervised online. You need to know what's going on in their digital lives. And for me, that starts with every router has a plug. You can unplug from the wall and turn off the internet. So we have the thing where we have 2 routers in the house. We have the main router that the internet comes in, and we have a secondary one, and that's the one my children have been on. And their devices connect to that one on the Wi-Fi, and their PCs are hardwired to that one. So that one could be turned off, and the internet could be left on for the adults in the house. And you can
still have your access.
And that one can go off. It used to go off at 9 o'clock at night, and then it goes off at 11 o'clock at night. So you can set different times for when they have access to do things online.
I know with my 11-year-old, I like playing games with her because it's a time when you can actually sit down and have a little bit of just you time.
Yeah.
And I miss that they don't make games that aren't multiplayer anymore.
Cooperative, in the room, cooperative.
Yeah, I don't like games that you have to go online to play. So we tend to play things like Lara Croft, where we can just play the 2 of us.
I recommend Castle Crashers. It's a 2D scroller, knights bashing things game, up to 4 players on the Xbox One.
Yeah,
that's a lot of fun.
We had an incident on Saturday night where we had a bit of a sleepover here, and they said, right, we'll go in, and we hooked up the switch and hooked up the thing, and then I turned around and said, let's knock on Just Dance. And then I realised they were playing Just Dance. I
was watching that from the back of the car.
And I'm looking, I go, Just Dance with 300 other people around the world were in this, and you were all getting your scores.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God,
we have the Kinect. It was one of the Christmas presents they got was the Kinect for the Xbox.
Yeah.
And Christmas Eve, I had my 3 nieces over, and they're all under 12. And they wanted to come in and play the Kinect. So we set it up for them, and they're popping balloons, and they're singing, doing karaoke. Or we have the Star Wars with the Kinect. They're there with the lightsabers, giving it loads.
It is actually really do you remember when the DS came out first, and you were playing Roger Federer and you were running around like this?
Oh no, I was the guy who had it all just worked out.
Yeah,
on the couch, it's just the wrist.
You could just move. Whereas I was diving and thinking I was Boris Becker sliding on my knees.
I'm telling you, some of the exercise things through the Kinect, they're hardcore.
Yeah.
Like, I've done the jumping up around, popping balloons, and then it goes up a level, and next thing you're going, hang on, I've been jumping around like a lunatic for 10 minutes, I'm out of breath.
and this, where they're talking, I mean, okay, to me it's utterly ridiculous, this ban on smartphones for kids under 15. I'm like, will you ever cop on? I mean, I spoke to my 11-year-old about it, and she's thrown her eyes up to heaven, and she's like, oh my God. I mean, it's like, you never solve anything by banning it. It has never worked.
It's always education, and we don't have the education to empower parents to say, this is how you put a plan in place. So my kids are nearly both young adults at this stage. So they grew up with 2 very techie parents, and we were like, how the internet is in the house. They're both playing games at 5 and 6 on PCs in the family living room, where we could actually see their screens.
Yeah.
So it was there, and then when they got older and they went online, it wasn't until they hit 15 they were allowed to have a PC or a laptop in their bedrooms. That was always in a family space where anytime I could see their screens. We could always check the router to see what they were looking at.
That's right.
When they started to get smartphones, the rule was they were not to install any apps on the phone without getting permission first.
Yeah.
So there'd be no fear of them installing Kick or Tinder at 11. Yeah. They would have to say, Ma'am, can I put this on my phone?
We have the same, that if they want anything, it comes up as a notification, and we have to authorise it.
Yeah, and that's the smart way of doing it.
The best idea I've seen, or the best idea I've heard, is not to let kids under 15 have their phones in their bedrooms. I mean, it's so simple. It's so, there you go, parents, there's a nice, easy solution. At least that's daylight hours or nighttime hours covered.
Before you go to bed, your phone comes downstairs in the kitchen and it's plugged in to be charged. Don't let them have the charger in their bedroom. The charger has to be in the sitting room or in the kitchen.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a real easy step for parents, a real easy step.
But I know they talk a lot about cyberbullying, but there's also the other side of, I grew up and I was very badly bullied when I was growing up. And if I had been able to reach out to friends when I needed them, because I went to convent school in Finglas and I didn't get on with that share of bitches. I'm sure there were people that I was a bitch as well. But the fact
I know some of those girls.
So the fact that...
Yeah, and you're right. Awful bitches.
So the fact that my 2 have friends who are in different parts of this country or in other countries that they've met via gaming, and they can reach out to their friends about what's going on. Their social circle and their friends are much bigger due to the fact that they have the internet, and they do genuinely support each other. And they come into me, and my son has a friend who's in New Zealand, and something happened in her life, and he comes into me and says, "This thing happened to my friend. Is there? I can't do anything. Obviously, she's in New Zealand, but is there any advice or any websites I could send her to?"
Yeah.
So you've got literally the other side of the planet, two people connecting and supporting each other through a rough time, and that's amazing.
It was my niece's birthday in Australia yesterday, and I said it to my eldest sister, it was your cousin's birthday, and she goes, "Oh, we're all on this group, we all," and they're all on a group. They chat, all these connected, and there's ones in America, Australia, and they're all on a little group and they all chat.
I think it's great that we can actually. It's nice to end with a piece where we're talking up the actual, because there is so much to be said for it, where you're able to go in and actually. We can all be the guy who's screaming that we need to regulate this, and we link it to a PSC card and all these off the wall things that are actually they're impractical, unfeasible, and actually illegal.
Do you know what's really interesting about that is, so you've got the whole what they call the real name wars, which is what they're saying, that you must absolutely have your real name on your social media account. This to me is really weird and strange. The fact that I actually have Janet O'Sullivan actually on my Twitter, for me, is very weird. And for the longest time I had my online handle or my gaming handle, and both of my children use online non the internet.
Yes,
because that's, you pick your handle and you pick your name, and people will get to know you. And using your real name has huge impact on LGBT people, or people that are trans, or people who are in abusive relationships, or people who can't speak openly, or people who just have people in their lives who are out to get them.
There's lots of different reasons why.
What I found really interesting is, when we were talking to my two about how to behave online, was I actually got the terms and conditions with our internet service provider. So whether you've got Virgin for your cable, or Vodafone, or whatever the box your internet, you pay the people for the box of the internet, they always have your terms and conditions. And I sat my kids down and said, okay, making fun of people and trolling is cruel. It's not, I want you to be kind to people, but these are actually the terms and conditions in our internet. And the legal agreement that we have to the people who make the internet happen is that you don't use this to harass people. It's actually written in black and white in every internet service providers. So if somebody is harassing, and we do actually have the legal thing to do this, it's called a Section 9, that a Garda superintendent or a judge can actually go to an internet service provider and say, we need the information on this person from this IP address from these times, because they said this, they made this threat, or they're harassing somebody. So there already is that accountability, traceability. We just need the Gardaí to start acting on it. They're under-resourced. We also need our politicians to realise that there already is the procedures to do this. But I love the fact that my nieces will Google chat me or send me a message, and that my daughter will send me messages, or a voice chat or a video message to her granny in Wexford, to her other auntie who's over in Thailand. That there's that those barriers are gone. There's no longer the living wake when somebody emigrated to America. So you can still see what the kids are doing and what you're at, which is great.
and you're right about that. There is a big positive aspect, and it's nice that people are looking at the positive aspect. And indeed, causes like repeal would never exist if it wasn't for social media. There is a great big chunk of social media that does great good.
It's always the case of being able to find your tribe online. People that are into the same things as you, whether it be D&D and finding out, or someone that's into a particular game, or somebody's into horticulture, or somebody's into the craft beers and breweries. Tortoises. It allows people to come together and share things and find your tribe and find those discussions. Yeah. It's been huge in terms of repeal and abortion rights for people to find each other and meet up. If anyone's looking at my Twitter, I have a bunch of Twitter lists, and all the abortion rights campaign regional groups have their Twitters that are all listed, and then all the other repeal groups like Grandparents for Repeal, Farmers for Repeal, the 8th Amendment, or the different constitutional groups are all there as well. So there are these wonderful accesses, and you'll find the abortion rights campaign on Twitter at Free Safe Legal, because we couldn't get abortion rights.
Well, look, Jan, thanks very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's hopefully now we're going to leave here and we're going to see that we have
good news.
Good news.
I would. Do you know what I would hate? I would hate to find that they've come up with some sort of cockamamie thing that I feel in my heart I couldn't support. That's a nightmare. I
firmly believe it's going to be good news. I firmly believe the news is maybe not tonight, because I don't think it'll be tonight. I think tonight will be the Minister for Health has to go away now and come back with, based on the advice of the Attorney General, this is the wording that we're going to come back with. But I think you're going to get a cabinet united in its decision to say that we're going to support
They still have a free vote at cabinet level. That's the other really interesting thing about this politically, that usually all of the votes are whipped.
Yeah.
So it's pre-decided, and the government decides what legislation will happen because they have the votes in bag. The fact that we're seeing them not having that, and the fact we have a majority government, we're seeing the biggest amount of cross-party collaboration on an issue for the whole of the state. So it's huge.
It's the one example of where new politics is actually working.
I know, but it's really, people keep saying, but surely you should be celebrating. And I'm like, no, not yet.
No, not yet. But we'd be more optimistic than we were 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago.
Definitely more hopeful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you for
on.
having me. It's been fun.
That's great. Listen, guys, if you like what you hear, hit subscribe, tell your friends, share the news. We keep asking you, you gotta tell people about us, because we're not out there advertising. It's all about clicking.
As I said the other day, we're not in it for money. We're in it to make a difference.
You're in it for money. Goodbye, folks.